It's been postulated, aptly I believe, that one of the primary appeals of contemporary video gaming is wish fulfillment. Why make Uncharted or Tomb Raider? Well, the average person probably won't be embarking on an archaeological spelunking expedition to sift through the remnants of an extinct civilization in some dank, sand-caked chasm filled with gun-toting minorities, unless of course you happen to be Morgan Webb's Obi-Gyn. But the fact remains that a sizable contingent of future gaming releases will remain focused on satisfying what are, in essence, power fantasies. For example, the power fantasy of flying through the galaxy your own personal stealth warship staffed with half-naked turquoise alien broads, sexy robots, and one repressed homosexual. But in the case of today's subject, the power fantasy is clear: to experience the thrill and tension of being somewhere you shouldn't be while doing something you shouldn't be doing. No, it's not an autobiographical Piers Morgan video game, but it is a simple concept of deceptive complexity. There are many influential titles in the swollen, puckered annals of interactive media, but preposterously few whose influence is no less immutable today than it was back when America still had a functioning fucking economy. Having long since taken its place alongside Deus Ex and System Shock atop the holy trinity of game design, today's episode is a comprehensive history and analysis of Looking Glass Studios' peerless pioneer, my favorite video game series of all time, Thief. It's certainly worth noting that long before the Thief series had ambled across its first steam-drenched rooftop, Looking Glass Studios already had a record of excellence that was rapidly becoming the envy of the industry. They effectively pioneered the sandbox RPG format with the almighty Ultima Underworld in 1992. You're welcome, Elder Scrolls. They invented the modern RPG shooter hybrid with the original System Shock as early as 1994. Think nothing of it, Mass Effect. When Terra Nova dropped in 96 despite bombing harder than Ralphie May after gastric bypass, it became the standard bearer for squad-based tactical mech gameplay. Here's looking at you, Mech Warrior, and contrary to what Yahtzee reported after 15 full seconds of exhaustive research on Wikipedia, Looking Glass's Flight Unlimited series was both a commercial and critical success within the flight sim genre, which at the time was still more lucrative than France's white flag industry. But even among such illustrious company, the game initially entitled simply The Dark Project stood immediately apart. Hell, it even managed to depart from the rapidly proliferating pack of 3D stealth pioneers like Metal Gear Solid and the criminally underrated Tenchu Stealth Assassins, both of whom, like our President's Seed on a White House intern's aquamarine frock, were both released in 1998. I'll be honest, Thief the Dark Project is far and away my least favorite in the series. This is chiefly a function of the game not even being intended as a full-on stealth game until literally just a few months away from the game's actual release. Consequently, I find much of the title, which in case the developers forgot is neither Tomb Raider, Relic Hunter, or Garrett Zombie Slayer, but motherfucking Thief, suffers from exceptionally schizophrenic level design. A brilliant burglary-themed mission and a superb Shawshankian jailbreak scenario are followed up with a positively laborious noctambulant stroll through tombs filled to the fucking risers with more undead than Boca Raton. But the actual presence of the undead isn't what I object to. It's the sheer fucking volume that gives me pause. A few undead peppered throughout an atmospheric house of horrors, it's a good fucking time. Spooky, creepy, and more importantly, each individual encounter remains impactful. But as I believe we've all learned from Dead Space 3, when enemies of every conceivable configuration are perpetually shambling the fuck towards the player with an eye for some carotid carryout, you invariably find yourself more desensitized than a drunken leper. It's a masterful game, don't get me wrong, and it might have the strongest actual narrative of any game in the series, but it's impossible to escape the feeling of taking one step forward and 3 steps back while playing Thief the Dark Project. Lucky for Thief, then, that the one step was so motherfucking monumental. But if the level design suffers from the odd blemish, the lasting legacy is utterly immaculate. I really can't stress enough how profoundly different the stealth genre and gaming at large would be without the presence of this titan of treachery. If I was scoring for long-term impact, The Dark Project is a perfect 10, but grading this as an actual gameplay experience, it registers at a very respectable 4 flash bombs out of 5. With a bit more focus and a tad more actual fucking thievery, this game would have been the best in the series hands down. And speaking of which... Thief 2 is the demigod Asian kid at the arcade dry humping the Marvel Capcom 2 machine for weeks on end, calmly readjusting his turtle shell glasses and swilling Sierra Mist as you frantically squander your college fund in a vain attempt to salvage your last modicum of masculinity. It's so good, it's actually obnoxious. If you find yourself so inclined, consult my
shameless plug
Thief 2 review for further extrapolation on this topic, but the abridged version is no less glowing, I assure you. With every flaw in the Dark Project ameliorated and every strength amplified, along with a spoonful of graphical upgrade, Thief 2 is the dictionary definition of perfect sequel. This game is a masterpiece. 15 enthralling missions of staggeringly dense detail and baffling scope. From a simple shipping dockyard sandbox with innumerable entrances, exits, nooks, crannies, and hidden depths, to a rooftop trek through several city blocks that concludes with Garrett infiltrating a 6th-floor motherfucking tower, this game features one of the only instances of missions within missions within missions. And unlike the Dark Project or Oblivion, these massive spaces aren't emptier than Bethesda's promises. Or Obsidian's excuses. Look, I've played this game over a dozen times and I haven't even come close to discovering half the hidden shortcuts, Easter eggs, and metric shit piles of hidden loot on offer in the Life of the Party mission, for example. It's a tour de fucking force. Factor in a brilliant plot about a charismatic madman leading an already fanatical religion clean off the clerical cliff in an attempt to burn away the imperfection of human flesh to make way for the immortal machine. It's one of the few examples of the medium rendered as art. Playing the Dark Project at launch in '98, in retrospect, I think I was more attracted to the potential of the game than any of the data that was actually pressed to the fucking disc. Oh sure, you had moments of unsurpassed genius like the Assassin's Mission, wherein Garrett survives a failed attempt on his life only to tail the criminals back to their employer's castle, at which point he delivers a very pointed message by literally swiping the coin purse from a crime lord's belt. But then you also had strange bedfellows, and an undercover mission with a social stealth mechanic that's spottier than Gorbachev's forehead, unless we forget the 31 flavors of tomb raiding. And sadly, Thief Gold only compounds this problem by proffering the single worst mission in the entire series in the form of the Downwind Thieves Guild. The brightest light casts the darkest shadow, or so Chris Nolan's dusty tome of filmmaking cliches informs me, which serves as an explanation for why the odd blemish in the Dark Project can often make a pimple look more like a goiter. But Thief 2 exfoliates, it moisturizes, it drinks 3 bottles of water every day and pisses like a racehorse in consequence. It casts a wide net of influence, encompassing all in the genre in a vast, overextended metaphor. Look, there is no greater stealth game in existence, motherfucker. Pure artistic kleptomania. 5 flash bombs out of 5. Grease your pitchforks and douse your torches in fanboy tears, fellow villagers, because depending on who you are speaking to within the Thief community, 2004's Thief Deadly Shadows is alternately a brilliant and innovative sequel or a botched abortion of Kermit Gosnellian proportions. With the untimely end of Looking Glass Studios, a death which I will hasten to note was not caused by the self-destruction of John Romero, as certain perpetually misinformed Anglo-Australian permatwats have alleged, the rights to the Thief franchise defaulted to Ion Storm's Austin branch, best known for producing the video game equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant in Deus Ex, with a proportionate number of melted faces. And this time the anal divot in the producer chair belonged to the almighty Warren Spector, whose work at Looking Glass on the original Thief title had actually served as his main inspiration for Deus Ex itself. I like this game. I like it a lot. In fact, there are certain things it does even better than Thief 2. The overhauled dynamic lighting system, which allowed for transitory light sources and shadows which Garrett could actually hide in. A feature Eidos Montréal is currently foisting as a brand new innovation in the upcoming Thief 4. Because lies! The birth of the City Hub, a perpetual open world, albeit heavily condensed rendering of the city that appeared to evolve with the player as the game wore on. Sometimes for the better, often for the hilarious. Even the game's sound engine, already a mammoth pillar of the game's core design, had a massive facelift and remains the only game in the franchise that actually supports dynamic surround sound out of the box. The introduction of a lock-picking mechanic, literally creating gameplay where none had existed before. Quite possibly the greatest soundtrack in the series. What curb stomps this game's potential, sadly, predominantly stems from interoffice politics and the death throes of Eidos Interactive in general. With such a wide and innovative feature set, sadly some things like swimming and rope arrows had to be cleaved from the game's design entirely in the name of budget and time constraints, while other new additions probably should have been. The introduction of what is, in my view, a very welcome optional third-person perspective requires a very practiced and soft touch, but with deadlines closing in and Eidos going up like the Hindenburg, what required a scalpel had to be done with a jackhammer. Look, you can piss and moan about the game needing to make concessions for consoles, and you'll certainly have no shortage of company, but that's not a party I'd turn up for. While the original Xbox's memory limitations likely didn't help, Thief Deadly Shadow's shit piece of a game engine had more to do with that than Microsoft's anemic console. Look at the back of the PC game box, for fuck's sake. 256 megabytes of RAM in 2004? And that's the minimum requirements. That's how much applied RAM the PS3 has now. I mean, having 1 gigabyte of RAM was a fucking novelty in 2004. By the standards of the day, this game was a fucking resource hog, and that is a fact. Xbox or no Xbox. This is, in my opinion, the second best game in the series, is a testament to the incredible talent, vision, and dedication of Ion Storm, and so many of the ex-Looking Glass employees who transplanted there. With missions that strike the finest balance between horror and theft, a brilliant and satisfying conclusion to Garrett's narrative arc, and without question the single most horrifying game level ever made, Thief Deadly Shadows, taken on its own terms or measured against its predecessors, is a worthy sequel in every conceivable regard. Having beaten all 3 games 7 ways from Sunday and back again, you will never convince me otherwise. 4.5 out of 5, Ion Storm, rest in peace. Well, the ball of dung's in your court now, Eidos Montréal, and I'd be lying through my teeth if I claimed the trepidation wasn't beginning to reach fever pitch. You can preemptively pat yourselves on the back for remaining faithful all you like, but between Steven Russell being kicked to the curb in favor of Gerard Depardieu with a Quebec accent that's thicker than a J-Lo prenup, slow-mo contextual third-person kills, bone-snapping finishing moves, and linear jogging set pieces you hijack from abominable shit pieces like Need for Speed The Run, at this point Newt Gingrich is sounding more faithful than you motherfuckers. I mean, all he did was diddle some other skank while his wife was on her death boudoir. At least he didn't power inject the fucking cancer cells into her aorta. Drop the syringe and reassess, Eidos Montréal, because between the 5 years of development, redoubling your Napoleonic resolve to cling to next-gen exclusivity, the dive-bombing gaming market, and your shameless censorship and antagonization of the die-hard Thief fanbase, this is looking distinctly as if it will be your Waterloo, my friends. I'm Razorfist. God fucking speed.
Stealing is my way of life. When I want something, I always get it. I am Garrett. Did you miss me?
So that's the famous Garrett, huh? Guess he's not as good looking as I'd heard.